Hello guys, welcome back to the Ginger Binge. Today we're doing something a little bit different. We will be talking about movies, but not in the way that we usually do. Today I am going to give you a history lesson on the production code, also known as the Hays Code. If that sounds interesting to you, please stick around. So I know you're wondering, why is she doing a video on the Hays Code, something that no longer exists, something that is no longer in use in the movie industry? Soon I will be posting videos about my Academy Award challenge, and a lot of those films are the way they are because of the production code, and I think that explaining what the fuck the production code is would be very beneficial to my viewers. The Hays Code, or the actual name, the production code, was invented by the Motion Picture Producers and Distributors of America, who were basically the MPAA, you know, the group today that considers a female orgasm NC-17. They're that reasonable group, if it gives you any context. So, to no one's surprise, the 20s were a very wild decade, and Hollywood was filled with rape, drugs, and murder. And instead of the studios putting an effort to rehabilitate these actors, they made them sign these morality clauses so that in case these actors ever violated them, they could fire them. This was the first step in fixing the negative press surrounding Tinseltown at the time. In 1921, there were 37 states that passed nearly 100 censorship bills towards motion pictures. And it was clear that what was considered acceptable viewing in New York would not be the same as acceptable in Wisconsin. So instead of catering to each of these individual laws and able to show their films in these states, they decided to self-regulate as it was cheaper. Censor boards in these states would charge the studios a fine for every foot of film they cut out, and also for every single title card they had to change. Previous attempts had been made to clean up films before. In 1915, the Supreme Court ruled that motion pictures were not protected by the First Amendment. In 1916, studios joined together to create the National Association of the Motion Picture Industry. It was an attempt to create a self-governing form of censorship so that New York wouldn't create its own censor board, and obviously that failed. New York ended up doing that anyway. That rendered the group pointless, essentially. In 1922, William Harrison Hayes, the former chairman of the National Republican Committee and former deacon of the Presbyterian Church, became the first president of the MPPDA. The beginning of his presidency was essentially pointless because he was being paid the modern day equivalent of $1.4 million to guess what these states' censor boards wanted and what they didn't want. At this point, there were no structured rules that he had to make studios follow to please these censorship boards, because the boards did not make this information public. So in 1929, a whole group of religious white dudes whose names I can't be bothered to remember basically handed Hayes this production code full of what they wanted to see out of the film industry. As a reminder, this production code was not a law, just suggestions in order to help these films pass censorship. They weren't really being enforced until 1934, when a group of Catholics began to protest Hollywood. This was not just Catholic individuals, but Catholic-owned corporations who were financiers of Hollywood films, and they threatened to reduce funding if the studios would not cooperate. Hayes also blacklisted 117 actors because he disagreed with their lifestyles, which we all know means that they were either sexually promiscuous or not straight. So there are three principles to the production code. Number one, the audience should not be made to align with immorality. Number two, only people on the paths to righteousness should be portrayed. And number three, Natural or man-made law should not be made light of or ridiculed, and breaking the law should not be shown in a sympathetic light. Now, those are the three principles, but there are a very long list of restrictions, so stay with me. There can be no nudity or suggestive dancing. Religion could not be ridiculed, and religious figures cannot be depicted as villains. Drinking and doing drugs was forbidden unless relevant to characterization or plot. Crime could be talked about but not explicitly shown. No homosexuality, no STDs, no childbirth, no cursing, only vague off-screen murders as not to inspire copycats. Revenge could not be justified. Marriage and the home were to be prioritized. No casual sex. Adultery had to be implied and definitely never justified. Interracial relationships forbidden. No passionate sex or kissing. The American flag had to be treated with respect. Foreigners had to be depicted fairly. No vulgarity. Capital punishment, prostitution.
Exploit yourself. Go to some big city where you will find opportunities. Use men. Be strong, defiant. Use men to get the things you want.
Torture, surgeries, and violence to children and animals had to be treated with the utmost sensitivity. So there were some cons to the code. Basically, if you couldn't depict foreigners in an unfair light, then you couldn't depict Nazis at all. So any Holocaust films, that's why they were all made in the fucking 90s. The Hays Code basically supported the continuation of whitewashing and brownface, yellowface, and blackface because actors of color could not play the characters that were on the script. Those had to be played by white people in yellowface. For example, Anna May Wong, the famous Chinese American actress, she wanted to play the role of the Chinese mistress in The Letter because that is what it is in the script. The Letter is based off a play from 1927. The Man Who Dies at the Beginning has a Chinese wife. In the 1940 version, the Chinese wife is played by a white woman, and she has makeup on to look Asian, and that was okay for the time because of the Hays Code. You know, that white male character could not have had a Chinese wife because interracial relationships were banned by the Hays Code. And Anna May Wong couldn't play a Chinese woman. The character had to be changed to a Eurasian woman who couldn't speak English. And that's fucked up because in 1956, the TV, was getting bigger and bigger, and they decided to do a televised version of the play. And guess who played the Chinese wife? Anna May Wong. Television had no production code, and yeah. Another reason for the decline of audience for Hollywood films was the import of foreign films such as Bicycle Thieves, Bergman films, Kurosawa films, Godzilla. Those films were more exciting and were allowed to depict some topics that couldn't be shown in domestic films because of the Hays Code. I remember at the beginning when I told you that the Supreme Court ruled that the First Amendment did not apply to motion picture films. Well, that was overruled in 1952, and that meant for the first time in 37 years films were protected by the Constitution. Society was changing, and what was considered a taboo in 1922 did not mean that it was still taboo 30 years later in 1952. In 1956, some of the code was rewritten to allow adultery, interracial relationships, and prostitution. Because, just think about it, how dumb would it be for you to come home and every week you watch a TV show where a white woman is married to a Cuban man, your favorite rock star is married to a fucking black woman, and if you follow the personal life of your favorite actor, you know that he has never in his life been interested in white women. And even though the Hays Code technically existed until 1968, it was basically fucking dead in 1959 thanks to one of my favorite directors, Mr. Billy Wilder, with his creation of the film Some Like It Hot. The film was not approved by the MPAA at all, but the studio still released it and it became a box office hit. It made over 13 times its $3 million budget. And that's all Hollywood needed to know that they really didn't need to kiss the production code's ass anymore. And because of that, for the next 9 years, Hollywood began to get wilder and wilder and crazier and more inappropriate. And the MPAA knew that they had to change with the times as well. And that is why they created, instead of a list of long, stupid rules that are clearly biased by religion and that not everyone adhered to, they decided to do a rating system, and that's where PG came from, and G, and rated R, and as I was talking about earlier, NC-17, because they believed that if you had somewhat of a warning before going into a film, then you can make your decision on whether or not you want to see it. It wouldn't just be a blind shock of, oh my god, I had to watch a film that I didn't agree with. No, they're giving you a warning that there's some violence in there, so you can't be like, oh, my virgin eyes. So yeah, that's basically the history of the production code. I hope you enjoyed this little history lesson and won't be completely clueless when I address it in the future. Thank you guys so much. Love you.